Hi everyone and welcome. I'm out here in my garden, and as I've been doing lately, I'm visiting in on my outdoor compost tub. Here within this old trash pail, I put all my old kitchen scraps, garden waste, clippings from my plants in my garden. Although my garden at this point is toast, I've more or less taken it apart for the most part, at least. Peppers are still there, but I've taken down all the tomatoes and stuff. And this bin is constantly being replenished with all kinds of material, but somehow the level just never seems to rise. And the main reason is that there's a whole bunch of composting creatures in here helping to break the material down almost constantly. A lot of them are worms. A lot of them are worms that have made their way into this container on their own. I've never put any worms in here myself. I've never put anything in here other than material that needs to be composted. So the worms have made their way in here on their own. And the other type of creature that's made its way into here on its own is black soldier fly larvae. The black soldier flies, luckily, have colonized this compost tub of mine year after year, and they're incredible. They're incredible, like eating machines. Those little guys. They just eat, and break down stuff in your compost tub like crazy. The material in this container looks pretty stirred up. You can see all kinds of castings and broken down material right here on the top surface. It's because it was only 4 days ago I was in here last time looking to pull out worms that I could use to repopulate my outdoor worm bin. So my outdoor worm bin recently got raided by some sort of a little burrowing creature. My mistake was leaving that container on the ground, and some sort of a vole or a mole or something made its way in there and gobbled up all of the worms that were in there. Not all of them, but a large number of them. And since that outdoor worm bin is now, I can't believe it's already been 14 weeks since I harvested all the castings from that container. I relocated the worms. Well, I didn't relocate the worms. I actually had somebody that wanted worms, and they got those worms out of that container. And then I kind of held on to just a handful of worms and tried to relaunch that container at that time, 14 weeks ago, 98 days ago. And over time, I did exactly what we're doing here now. I came into here recruiting worms with which to repopulate that container, and I had actually estimated the population of that bin to be thousands and thousands of worms. But that was before the mole or the vole or the shrew or whatever it is got in there and started gobbling all of them up. So I've been on a mission lately over the past week and a half or so to try to repopulate that container. I was about to just abandon it, but I kind of had a change of heart. So I've been working on trying to get the population in that container replenished, because you know, a 98-day-old bin, a 3-month-old bin at this point, 14 weeks old, it should be pretty far along, especially since it had at one point had an estimated, many thousands of worms. I think the estimate was somewhere in the neighborhood of 4,000 worms being in that bin. But, after the population got wiped out for the most part, the composting activity in that container dropped off significantly. So I'd like to try to get the population in that container back up to a respectable amount so that the container can try to sort of recover and start getting back on its feet and have a restored ability of breaking down materials. Because there's so much stuff in there, so much edible material in there. It's just sitting there waiting for someone to come along and eat it. I figured I'd try to come back out here since it was a nice day and try to find some creatures to use to populate the container. It's pretty interesting. What you see in here alongside the worms, you can see a couple worms in my hand, but the majority of what's in my hand here is the larvae of the black soldier flies. And they're usually quite active, but since it was chilly last night, I believe it's got to do with the temperature. I mean, I'm pretty sure that these little guys are still kind of moving in my hand, but barely. The last time I was out here, I think it was 70 plus degrees, and these little guys were squirming in my hand. I could barely hold on to them. They were moving around. They were so active. But I believe in the cold temperatures, their activity drops off significantly. And I was curious how it is that they survive the cold temperature. I always thought that they just die out when it gets really cold, but I did a little bit of reading on it, and it seems that these black soldier fly larvae remain in this larva state typically for, I forget what it is now, a few weeks before they grow to the point where they're old enough to pupate, turn into an actual fly. But when the temperature drops, they can remain in this larva form for many, many months and wait until the temperature becomes more favorable, and then they'll reactivate, and then they'll continue growing and then pupate later when the temperature and the conditions, the weather is more favorable for them to be able to survive and thrive. You can hear somebody running their leaf blower or some sort of noisy machine off in the distance. Hopefully it's not drastically interfering with the video. Alright, I feel like I'm making very little progress here. Usually I find nice pockets of many, many worms to pull out of here, but I feel like I'm having a hard time locating worms, and that's when I need to tell myself that I can't be so picky. You know, I've just got to go with the number of handfuls, regardless of how successful or unsuccessful each handful of worms selecting is, and just take whatever I can get. And sometimes I do really well collecting lots and lots of worms. Other times, not so many. And it does feel like I've tapped into the worm supply here quite a number of times over the past few months. I'm trying to build up the population in my outdoor worm bin. But I can't imagine that I would have depleted their numbers so significantly that I'd have, such a hard time finding worms for this mission. Sometimes I wonder if it gets chilly, do they, dive down? Do they go heading for the soil beneath the container to try to take shelter from the cold? Maybe they think they're going to freeze up here, and maybe they think that if they burrow down deeper, they'll be able to avoid freezing. I don't know. I believe this is a bundle of twine. Is that what this is? Maybe not. Some sort of a vine. Maybe it's I believe it might be cucumber plants. When the cucumber plants gave up their growth a few weeks ago, I took the majority of them down, threw them in my compost container here. It seems like they like, the worms seem to like cruising around within that material. Oy, that noise in the background is getting annoying. Alright, it seems like we're starting to come up against another little pocket of worms here and there, but I should really just keep pressing on here. I shouldn't really be so selective. I keep trying to hold off until I get that perfect ideal handful of worms with, tons and tons of them. And if it's not that, I just chuck the handful back in the container, but that's probably not a good idea. I should probably just take what I can get and try to fill this container up as quickly as I can, rather than trying to be so picky. Ay, ay, ay. That noise is so annoying. Hopefully it doesn't come through too loud on the microphone of the camera. I have a feeling it's going to sound pretty annoying. Alrighty. Let's see if we can get to the finish line here. This thing is starting to get pretty full. I got a feeling, I can't remember, did we pick over on this side yet? I was kind of walking around the container. I've lost my bearings on where I started. So whatever, hopefully down here we'll find a couple good handfuls of worms and we'll be done. Yeah, look at that. Right down here it seems like we've got ourselves a nice couple handfuls of worms. The material in this bin is pretty nice too, although it is littered with all kinds of peanut shells and everything else. That it is, if you go down deep, it does seem like it's mainly castings. Although if it was just the manure of worms, it would be castings. But since it's also the manure of the black soldier flies, I believe it's called frass. But I believe it's kind of a combination of both. Although I've heard that the worms actually eat the frass. So ultimately, if they do eat all the frass, then what we're talking about here is probably worm castings for the most part. But I don't know. Alright, I think I'm going to go for maybe one more handful. And then we'll get these little guys released in their new home over in my outdoor worm bag. My newly protected outdoor worm bag. Hopefully free of invaders and raiders. So we're going to head over there now and see how things look. Yikes, this noise is so annoying. Alright, let's head over there now. Alright, so we made our way over to my outdoor worm bin here, and yeah, the background noise persists. Somebody's either using their leaf blower or something like that. So it'll just have to be there. I can't avoid it, unfortunately. The container, our first telltale sign here, every time we would open up this container, was that it had all these burrows. There was like we see these, holes dug into the material where the invading creature had been kind of making little tunnels and stuff like that. But I guess the first good sign here is that there's no tunnels. So I think that our efforts are paying off here to try to keep this bin protected from invaders. It's also good to see that the worms are hanging out here on the surface. There'd been a number of really rainy days here. So even though that plastic was here, the moisture was getting in along the sides of the container. And you notice that the other bin too, the outdoor compost container, was also rather damp from all the rain. So now this is refreshing. One thing we had always started observing in here was that, and I think that was our first sign of trouble, was the fact that there was very few worms hanging out in here. But right off the bat, we can see a much different situation in here now. I've been trying to roughly keep track of how many worms we've been placing in here in our efforts to repopulate the container. And I think roughly estimated, my tracking spreadsheet estimates that we've got maybe 2,000 worms in here. This is a good sign too. Here's a worm cocoon. So worms are cozy enough in here that they're reproducing and laying their eggs, hopefully lining up the next generation of baby worms to come in here. Down here in the middle, we had, I think not long ago, collected together a lot of the leftover food scraps that we found while we were picking through here, and put them all kind of centralized in the middle. A lot of this stuff has been in here for a long time now, and I would have figured that this stuff would have been gone by now, if not for the little burrowing creature that came in here and wiped out the majority of the population. That's the other reason I want to try to beef up the population in here a little bit too, is that there is still a lot of uncomposted material in here that needs to be worked down, and the more worms we can get in here, the better. So this looks good. I'm glad, I mean, I was really worried the first time I came in here after I started observing all those little tunnels and evidence of some sort of invading creature coming in here and swiping all our worms. I would pick around here and I'd be like thinking to myself, where the heck are all the worms? It was almost barren of any life. So it's kind of nice just to pick around here a little bit and see this many worms hanging out in here. But let's get to the business at hand of releasing the worms that we collected. It's going to be a little bit hard to see all the worms that we gathered because, they're mixed in with all that other extra junk that came along for the ride. So, whatever. We'll try to get a glimpse at how many we collected. Before we go, though, I wanted to throw in a little bit of grit. It's just pulverized eggshell, basically, but that's the grit that I use in my worm bins. And, just in case it helps, once in a while, I like to throw a little bit in here. So I figured, why don't we just do that today as well? I haven't put any in here in some time. Whoop. I don't know. I've almost wiped out my supply. Go ahead, whatever. It's fine, I got more downstairs. I've been collecting a bunch of eggs, so I've got more that I can pulverize to replenish my stock. You might have noticed I was kind of shaking this around, but I'm also trying to take care not to breathe that in. You don't want to breathe this stuff in if it gets airborne. You've got to be careful. It's extremely coarse. It gets in your lungs, it can cause trouble. So you don't want that to happen. Be careful if you're doing something similar. Here on the surface, you don't see any worms. They've all, you know, kind of gone down into the material. So hopefully we'll see some after we release them. Let's spread this thing out and see how many we managed to collect, or at least try to see. Yeah, look at that. We got ourselves a pretty good pile of worms here. It's always nice to see a good hearty number of nice fat healthy worms released into our worm bin. Let's give these guys a little time to get cozy in their new space, and then we'll cover up and we'll be finished. Finally, a stop to the noise. And I think we're done here anyway. It usually takes a couple minutes for me to just go over and rinse off my stuff and my glove and everything else like that. And it sounds like the people in the neighboring yard have done their work and they've turned off their noisy machine just in time for us to finish up our work here in the worm bin and put things away. So I like the way things are looking in here. Finally recovering from the carnage of having had this bin invaded. Oh, there goes the noise again. All right, really quick before it gets much more annoying, let me just really quickly say thank you. Thanks for keeping me company on this little mission out here in my garden, trying to replenish the population of my outdoor worm bin. If you enjoyed the video, then please remember to leave me a quick thumbs up. That's always really appreciated. And also consider subscribing to the channel too. That's really appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.